A little over a year ago, when we got our hands on Starfield review codes, I had such grand plans. I had built meticulously designed documents to keep track of all my planet-hopping adventures, with intentions to produce a recurring narrative video series where I roleplayed a space pirate in Bethesda Game Studios' long-awaited sci-fi RPG. However, after completing the admittedly great Crimson Fleet quest chain, I very quickly hit a wall with my ambitions and found the game to be rather limited when it came to my ability to roleplay in the deep manner that I intended. Of course, I don't need to tell you that the reception to Starfield at launch was contentious at best, but it's been over a year since then, with the game receiving numerous updates, new content, and even a meaty expansion with Shattered Space. However, all these updates have only cemented in my mind that the game is going through an identity crisis, and I'm concerned it will never escape it. This video will be broken down into 3 parts: the last year of updates to the core Starfield experience, creations and mods, and then Shattered Space. Let's dive in. So let's talk about the core experience of Starfield and all of the updates that we've received over the last year or so. They have mostly addressed bugs and some quality of life improvements, but there have been some big additions, such as maps. Yes, if you weren't there at the launch of Starfield a year ago, you wouldn't know that there were no maps in the game. It was kind of frustrating, and it's a little bit ridiculous that we had to wait for a patch for maps, but they're in the game and they're really good. They make exploring the cities on some of these planets a lot easier and allow you to more quickly fast travel and get where you need to go. However, this is where this whole identity crisis issue already rears its head. You know, in this game, I think the reason they didn't include these maps is because they intended you to explore the world naturally without taking shortcuts and fast traveling and knowing exactly where you needed to go in the moment. However, that clearly didn't work, and they had to kind of retroactively add this map functionality back in, which is great because it takes out some of the tedium of exploring. But when you've built a game around the whole idea of unfettered exploration across all of these planets, it's a little damning to have to retroactively add this fast travel ease of use implementation back in. It really is a condemnation of that core experience that Bethesda intended the player to have. Along with maps, Bethesda added some new settings options. This ranges from visual settings, so now on console, you have the ability to unlock the frame rate. You can set it to a 40 FPS target, 60 FPS target, or have it completely unlocked, and you can have it target visual performance. On PC, we now have built-in DLSS features, which weren't there at launch, which means if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you're going to be able to get a little bit more out of this game than you were at launch, which is great. However, the best settings are in some of the gameplay customizations. You can tweak difficulty to various degrees, you can tweak how much damage you do, how much damage you get, you can tweak your carrying capacity. There's a ton of stuff, and the game does try to balance it by having it change your XP gains. So if you make the game tougher for yourself, you're going to get XP faster. And if you make it a bit easier, you're not going to gain as much XP. All of these new settings are great, and if you are jumping back into the game, I heavily recommend you take the time to go through them and tweak them to where they feel right for you. You can do a lot of this stuff with mods, but having them baked into the game and also having there be this risk-reward element, I think is just a great implementation. Bethesda didn't just add new settings and maps to the game, they also added some new quests, the big one being the Tracker Alliance quest. Essentially what this is a heightened bounty hunter questline. The initial questline you get is actually really fun. You have to explore this space station that's in zero gravity and has been taken over by these people that basically steal spaceships and then tear them down and sell off all the parts. It's really good. There's a really good twist at the end, but it just ends abruptly after that. And it seems that all future questlines are going to be ones that you actually buy from Bethesda. There's already one in the Creations catalog that is now implemented into the game that we will get into detail more later on. It's $7. There are arguments all over Reddit on whether it's actually worth the money. Hopefully they have some free quest lines in the future, because I don't know how I feel about this pay for quest model, but the initial quest line itself is worth checking out, and it's a very fun mission. Of course, we got a vehicle in Starfield, the very first vehicle in any of Bethesda's RPGs, but once again, it kind of highlights the fact that these worlds aren't really worth exploring. So much of them are so sparse and repetitive that you really just want to zip to where you need to go and get back to your ship as fast as possible. So again, the identity crisis really rears its head around the Rev 8 buggy, because really it's just Bethesda admitting that so much of the game is comprised of these worlds that, for the most part, you'll just want to skip over. But for me, the biggest identity crisis moment comes with the New Game Plus element of Starfield. A spoiler warning for what Starfield does with New Game Plus, but basically, in New Game Plus, what happens is your character leaves their universe to jump into a brand new universe for you to potentially start the story over. And sometimes when you jump into the New Game Plus, the world is different. The people at the lodge are different. There's either characters missing, sometimes they're children, sometimes they're even just plants. There seems to be about 10 different versions that you can jump through. So most of the time you are just going to jump into a very similar universe, and you can choose to be honest and say, hey, like, I'm from another galaxy, I'm here to find these artifacts to build up my power, or you can play dumb and you can go along and play through the game story. It is cool, and there are tons of people that have done these universe hops dozens of times. However, every time you universe hop, you leave everything behind. Any outposts you've built, any ships you've designed, and most importantly, the relationships you formed, they're all gone. None of that carries forward. So the game really wants you to check out all of these universes and keep gaining power as a Starborn, but it also cuts against the RPG nature of role-playing a character that is slowly increasing and maintaining relationships over time, and in some cases literally building upon the foundations of where you started. Every time you jump into a new universe, you have to think, is this where I want to settle down and make my home, or do I want to do a jump again? Now, if you do want to universe jump, which is really the most unique thing Starfield does, the biggest problem is, and again, another identity crisis issue, is to get to that coolest element of the game. You have to find all the artifacts, you have to build the armillary, and then jump through the Unity again. And finding the artifacts just sucks. It's not fun. It's the same process over and over again, which if you compound across all of the timelines you jump, you're literally doing it dozens of times. You're just going into an abandoned lab or a mine. There's no variety to it at all. And I would have hoped that when you jump into a new universe, maybe these artifacts are found in different places. Maybe someone found one and added it to their art collection, or maybe some space pirates found it and took it onto their ship and you have to go into their ship. But no, the New Game Plus doesn't really alter anything beyond the opening moments when you enter the lodge. After that, everything is pretty much the same, and that sameness gets really old really quickly. Alright, let's talk about mods and the creation kit. So before there was the creation kit, the way you got mods was through something like Nexus mods, where you would download them from a website. But the creation kit now basically allows you to access a lot of those mods in the game. When I went to Nexus mods, I was a little disappointed because so many of the top mods were still the same mods from last year. People have gotten way better at modding Starfield over the last year, but for the most part, it's still doing the same stuff that people were modding in the very beginning of Starfield launching. Having the creation kit is really great though, because it builds parity between console and PC. I was playing Starfield at launch between my PC and my Xbox. I had all these really great mods on PC, but none of that carried across to Xbox, meaning I had a very different experience when playing on console. However, now that I've kind of curated everything in the creation kit itself, a lot of the mods I was using on PC in that creation kit now, it's really great. It means that if I'm playing on console or PC, no matter what, I'm still going to have that similar experience that's really customized and tailored to how I want the game to feel. Even if you're not really someone that wants to mess around with mods, I really recommend checking them out. You can create a much better experience for yourself in Starfield with just a few simple tweaks. Here are some of my favorite ones. I really like the cheat terminal. I don't use most of it, but it's really great to just have the ability to turn on and off anything. It's less so that there are specific things it does that I recommend turning on or off. I just recommend that you have it there in case you do want to turn something like encumbrance off. The cheat terminal allows you to have those controls at your fingertips, and you can have them on and off when you like. There's a really great boost pack mod that doesn't give you infinite boost pack pack usage, but does allow you to use the boost pack continuously rather than in short bursts. It makes using the boost pack way more fun and makes it a lot easier to get around. There are a lot of Star Wars mods in the game, including the ability to make yourself look like the Mandalorian, which is very cool. But for me, I do recommend taking a look at the Star Wars Aliens pack, which basically turns some of the NPCs into aliens from Star Wars. I understand that in this lore, they decided that the only intelligent species in the galaxy was going to be human, but it really just plays into the idea that so much of Starfield is really the same, and having aliens in there really gives it a bit of a pop and makes exploration a bit more interesting. So many mods are about overhauling the UI, particularly when it comes to the game's inventory. The vanilla version of the inventory, even though Bethesda did implement updates and improvements, the mods do a much better job. There are a ton of different ways to overhaul your inventory with mods. The one I use and that a lot of people recommend is Praxis UI. So much of what you need to do to modify your gear and improve upon your spacesuit and all these other things requires materials, and unlike in past Bethesda games, you can't actually break down junk that you have found around the world into resources for them to craft. This recycler mod allows you to do that. It basically allows you to go up to any of the different modding benches to recycle whatever you want to, old weapons, gear, junk, anything, to get some of those resources. Also, there are mods that allow you to craft important things like digipicks, which you will run out of all the time. Look for those mods that increase your crafting abilities. Bethesda even relented themselves. They added ammunition crafting in the game when it wasn't there at launch. There's still a lot of stuff that, in my opinion, you should be able to craft that Bethesda doesn't allow you to, and you need mods in order to unlock those abilities. Starfield is at its best when it is tailored for you as a player. So if you've picked Starfield up for Shattered Space and you feel like it isn't really clicking with you, definitely take your time, look through the mods, see if you can make it click for you. Alright, let's talk about the big new expansion, Shattered Space. So already, Identity Crisis, right? It's set on one custom designed planet. You're on the home planet of House Va'ruun, and everything that you do in the expansion is all based on here. It does allow for some better and more memorable moments than what was in the vanilla game, but it does contradict with the entire pitch for what Starfield was, which was go out, explore all of these planets, make your own story. So when it came to this expansion, it really returns to a lot of the roots of Bethesda RPGs, which is great. But I think it's also kind of a shame that they felt the need to do this rather than think of a creative way to make the explore all these different planets experience work. Now, Va'ruun Kai itself is very cool. Basically, there was this failed experiment that kind of Thanos snapped half of the planet away, including chunks of the planet itself, and left behind these energy pools that the really thick ones, if you step into them, they'll teleport you somewhere else, but there's these bubbles all around that if you step in, create these zero-G environments, which are very cool. However, all of this custom detail and work that went into building Va'ruun Kai just, again, highlights how similar and uninteresting most of the planets in Starfield are. However, when it comes to building a more traditional Bethesda experience, there are some really great story moments in here, both in the main quest and side quest. There's a side quest that you'll find early on that has a really cool outcome depending on how you want to play it. There are some really interesting politics on Va'ruun Kai, and all of the quests ask you to figure out where you land on that political spectrum. And yeah, it generally makes for some interesting moments, and in my opinion, it's the biggest success of the game. However, my biggest disappointment stems from the fact that my companion, Andrasia, is from Va'ruun, and she has very little to say about it. Now, apparently there is a bug where if you have points in the leadership skill, and this apparently was something that was present at the beginning of the game that has kind of reared its head again now in the DLC, but it will essentially make some of your companions mute, including Andrasia. However, I have no points spent in the leadership system, and I felt like she was mute as is. There is a lot of stuff you see and do in this expansion that you would turn to Andrasia and think, what do you have to say about this? How do you feel about this? And most of the time, she has nothing to say. When you go through the whole process of becoming Va'ruun yourself, I turned to her and she had nothing to say. It was so frustrating.
What is it? Right.
This is a character who I really like, and my bond with has essentially become the core of what my Starfield experience is, and it's just really disappointing that this expansion is basically made around her entire culture, and other than some offhand remarks here and there, she may as well not be there, and that honestly sucks. Also, because the DLC is putting a big emphasis on the story and the persuasion system, which was pretty bad in the first game, because so much of this DLC has you conversing with people, it comes up a lot, and Bethesda has not improved on this system at all, it seems. There will be characters that you're talking to that will be unmovable, that swear you could never convince them in a million years to do the thing that you want them to do, and then the persuasion system kicks in, and you just pick a couple of lines and immediately they're on your side.
I don't think so. Perhaps you're right. It is one of my many specialties. All right, I'll let you in on their location.
It's really immersion breaking, as are some of the bugs. This is still a Bethesda game after all. When all is said and done, while Starfield is a far better experience a year on from its release, I feel as if there are too many flaws at the core of the experience for it to entice anyone that was put off by the vanilla version of the game. Some aren't even flaws, they're specific design choices that leave Starfield feeling a lot like its cutscenes, stiff and rather stale. What this last year has highlighted to me has less to do with where the game has come from, and more to do so with where the game is going. Bethesda is seemingly walking back a lot of its ambition in an attempt to provide players with a more traditional experience that the studio is known for, one that is customized and curated, putting the player on specific paths with intentional and timed beats along the way. And while that may assuage a lot of returning players, it really cuts against the grain of what Starfield was meant to be. And when those two realities collide with each other in the game, it makes for its most unsatisfying moments. If Bethesda Game Studios wanted to design an RPG for the future, I think it was a mistake for it to build so much of Starfield on the bones of its past titles. And in order for the studio to right the spaceship, it unfortunately has to lean more and more on those foundational elements rather than charting a new course. I hope when Bethesda closes the door on Starfield, it will also be closing the door on that era of the studio. RPGs have moved on in massive and numerous ways from the developer's once groundbreaking game design, much like how our character in the game must walk into a whole new universe and leave what came before behind in order to achieve their true potential. So too must the team at Bethesda.